And Chairwoman, we have everyone, and it is 1 o'clock. So whenever you are ready to begin, we can get the meeting started.
Thank you. I'm U.S. Election Assistance Commission Chairwoman Christy McCormick, and I'm calling this public meeting of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission to order. For the first order of business, I will call roll and establish a quorum. Vice Chair Hovland.
Present.
Commissioner Palmer.
Here.
Commissioner Hicks.
Present.
So the quorum is established. I'll now take a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to approve today's agenda as submitted. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays. Today's agenda as submitted has been approved. Today, we are pleased to consider the adoption of the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program, also known as ESTEP, as a permanent EAC program. Under the authority of the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, the EAC established ESTEP in 2022 to evaluate technologies not covered under the voluntary voting system guidelines. This need for a program like ESTEP is something the EAST heard from Congress, numerous state and local election officials, NAS, and the election community. This includes technology such as electronic ballot delivery systems, election night reporting, databases, and voter registration portals and databases. In response to the increasing demands from the public and key stakeholders, ESTEP recently piloted the first voluntary program for the testing of e-poll books on the federal level. The EAC conducted this pilot in consultation with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, and the cybersecurity firm Mandiant. We're pleased with the positive feedback we have received on this pilot program. On November 17th, we held a public meeting on this topic where we heard from pilot participants, such as commercial e-poll book manufacturers, voting system test labs, and state and local jurisdictions who commented on the advantages of a federal program. States without standards for e-poll book testing or certification said this EAC program will allow them to adopt federal requirements without any technical background or expertise on these systems. We also heard it removes the complications of conducting research and hiring technical experts or other related expenses to develop a formal program on the state level. Commercial manufacturers stated a unified set of standards would simplify system development, eventually allowing manufacturers to develop one product for all of their clients. Voting system test labs explained how a unified set of standards will lessen the burden of testing to multiple different state regulations. This means that voters will benefit from the constant improvements to these systems to meet federal requirements, improving the overall voting experience. These comments helped show the EAC there is interest and demand to include functional requirements in a formal e-poll book certification program, and that there is a manufacturer, VISTL, and state level support. This feedback is also promising for future voluntary certification programs for other election technologies developed through ESTEP. We are also seeking the public's input in the process. Currently, the voluntary electronic poll book requirements and and election supporting technology evaluation program manual are open for public comment until December 14th, 2023. All of these forms of feedback are extremely valuable and will help the EAC refine the program, show needed adjustments, and give us a path forward for e-poll books. At the EAC, our mission is to support the administration of elections, which ultimately improves voter confidence. The development of the ESTEP program is a significant step in fulfilling that mission. By establishing the ESTEP program, the EAC will be better able to provide for the development of robust voluntary standards, testing, guidance, and training material covering election supporting technologies. With that, I will now turn it over to Vice Chair Ben Hovland to provide his opening remarks. Vice Chair Hovland.
Thank you, Chairwoman McCormick. As voting technology has rapidly evolved in the 2 decades since the Help America Vote Act, it's critical that the EAC, election officials, and other partners are positioned to respond to emerging issues. As the Chairwoman mentioned, with more jurisdictions using election supporting technologies, there's been a real need for ESTEP's work to develop federal standards and testing programs to support this usage. ESTEP has also been important to the growth of the EAC as we've focused on building our in-house technical expertise by hiring more specialized staff and providing additional services. It may be hard to believe now, but just a short time ago in 2019, the agency had just one election technology expert on staff. Today, the EAC has reinvigorated our testing and certification division, which is currently a team of 10. And we also have the 4-person ESTEP team, which is led by Jay Phelps, who we'll hear from today. The EAC wouldn't have been able to develop a program like this just a few years ago due to the constraints of our budget. My colleagues and I have voiced our concern over the agency's historic underfunding to Congress, and we appreciate the increased support in recent years. I raise this again because efforts such as this would not have been possible without that additional investment. In turn, we've attempted to be responsible stewards of the taxpayers' money. This program and others have started as pilot efforts to assess the needs of the election community and where the agency could best contribute. I'm confident that ESTEP's pilot programs will not only help the EAC achieve a better understanding of the current landscape and election supporting technologies, but also how the agency should evolve to support election officials most effectively. I look forward to the presentation and conversation today. Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Commissioner Palmer to provide his opening remarks.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hovland. HAVA, Help America Vote Act, expressly allows the EAC to produce ways that the federal government can best assist state and local authorities to improve the administration of elections for federal office. As more states and localities use election supporting technologies, officials are looking to the federal government for voluntary standards and guidance. Currently, election administrators must rely on a patchwork of state laws, regulations, and certification. Programs of varying degrees of applicability, scope, and completeness. Many states have no program of testing or evaluation and seek the support of the EAC. The security of these systems have never been more important. It is a national security imperative. The EAC's objective is to establish standards for these critical election supporting technologies similar to the VVSG. This will enhance the security and accessibility of these systems for all users. Commissioner Hicks, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Palmer. As my fellow commissioners have noted, ESTEP was established in response to the needs of election offices and voters for a more secure and accessible voting experience. Last month, the EAC published a report on the ePollBook pilot program, the first election supporting technology examined under ESTEP. I'd like to take this time to acknowledge the 7 pilot program participants who volunteered their time and efforts to help the larger election community. This includes Election Systems and Software, NOINC, Maricopa County, Arizona Elections Department, the North Carolina State Board of Elections, Robles Elections, Inc., Telex Software Solutions, and VoteTech Corporation. Their participation and thoughtful feedback were critical to the success of the pilot program and the findings of the report. This pilot program gives us a roadmap for how to implement similar certification programs as we move forward. We'll continue to learn not only what will make this a success for the EAC, but what will make it a more valuable resource for election officials and voters. Chairwoman McCormick, I'll turn this back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks. I'd now like to introduce Jay Phelps, the Director of EAC's Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program, who will present on the Voluntary Electronic Pollbook Pilot Program and the proposed next steps for this program. Mr. Phelps.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to Chairwoman McCormick, Vice Chair Hovland, Commissioner Hicks and Palmer for the opportunity to present today on the Voluntary Electronic Pollbook Pilot Program and the next steps for the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program. As Chairwoman mentioned, my name is Jay Phelps, and I'm the Director of the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program, or ESTEP for short. My previous role before joining the EAC was the Director of the Election Modernization for the Indiana Secretary of State's office. In this role, I assisted in approving electronic pollbook certification on behalf of the Secretary of State. And previous to this role at the state, I was the elected county clerk in Bartholomew County, Indiana, where I pioneered the county's use of electronic poll books. Today, I will be given a presentation on the purpose of the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program, high-level findings from our voluntary EAC electronic poll book pilot program, changes to the electronic poll book requirements as a result of testing, and an overview of the certification process as outlined in the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program Manual. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can everybody see my presentation? All right, excellent. Before I begin, though, I'd like to give a quick overview. I know Chairwoman McCormick mentioned this in her opening remarks, but if you weren't able to tune in on the initial hearing we had on November the 17th, what is ESTEP and what are we tasked with? Well, we are tasked with evaluating the security and accessibility of election supporting technologies, such as electronic poll books, electronic ballot delivery systems, election night reporting databases, and voter registration portals and databases. Our program purpose, we are designed to establish and maintain standards for election supporting technologies that can be used by voting system test laboratories or VISTLs to test the systems that are submitted for evaluation. We are also designed to develop and maintain program manuals, administer test campaigns, and report on the results of these campaigns. Next, I would like to dig in a little bit deeper to the voluntary electronic poll book pilot program. Some high-level findings from that program was there wasn't a single requirement in which all piloted systems failed. The most dominant reason for failure was due to insufficient documentation. Manufacturers are capable of achieving requirements as currently drafted in the original version of 0.9. Oh, excuse me. Both VISTLs and manufacturers support a formal certification program. And we certainly understand that clear and frequent communication is vital for a successful certification program that's possible in the future. And that the piloted requirements, the current version 0.9 has required revision before implementing a formal program. Next, some of the recommendations from the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program team is that we would like to see some the revision to the 2024 Election Administration and Voting Survey, or EVES, to include questions pertaining to EPBs. Currently across the United States, when the survey goes out, the EVES asks, does your jurisdictions utilize electronic poll books, yes or no? We would like to include information such as the make and model of electronic poll books to enhance our data to be able to then assist our stakeholders even further. We also recommend and have, as Chairwoman also alluded to, the release and revision of voluntary electronic poll book requirements version 1.0 as a result of testing that will establish minimum expectations to achieve federal certification. And also the release of the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program Manual, version 1.0, clarifying processes and expectations. Again, both of these are on the Federal Registrar through December the 14th. And then finally, our next piloted process that's going to be a part of ESTEP is to focus on blank ballot delivery systems, where we are currently working on requirements as of today. Next, I'd like to talk about the voluntary electronic poll book requirements version 1.0, again, as the result of pilot testing. No requirements have been permanently removed from version 0.9 to 1.0. All requirements have been reorganized or renumbered for clarification. Some requirements are no longer required to achieve certification. New quick reference tags for easy identification of testing expectations have been added. And then kind of by the numbers, we have added 19 new requirements for functionality and interoperability. And, again, when we did version 0.9, our focus was on security, accessibility, usability. However, we have heard from stakeholders that they would like to see baseline functionality. So we have added those, and we're really excited about that. 41 requirements were clarified with language clarification. And another 41 requirements were labeled documentation required. That's going to make it easier for the manufacturers, participants, and the labs to understand when documentation is required. And then 31 requirements labeled if applicable. As I mentioned, the quick reference tags to our revised requirements, documentation required. Again, that simply stands out to let the participant know that they need to include this in their testing data package for certain requirements. Manufacturers must clearly mark documents to be treated as confidentials, and the EAC and the testing labs can request further documentation to ensure conformance. If applicable, was also added as a feature. If manufacturers wish to market functionalities, that the e-poll book must be evaluated to ensure conformance. Some of these requirements may be mandatory in future iterations, so we didn't want to completely remove them. We kind of want to be forward thinking and continue to list those, so those who develop new systems can kind of see what's coming in the future as a possibility. Documentation expectations. Prior to submitting an electronic poll book for evaluation, the EAC requires a comprehensive set of technical documentation to be included as a part of a complete application package. The application package shall include the following: customer maintenance documentation, which describes the maintenance that the vendor recommends and can be performed by a customer with minimal knowledge of the electronic poll book. Operations manual can be supplied to the customer for use by the individual who will operate the equipment. Use procedures is documentation providing specific election administration procedures recommended for the use with the electronic poll book. Software design is the logical design of the software or software architecture. This documentation should clearly indicate the various modules of the software, their functions, and their interrelationships with each other. This should include the data formats the electronic poll book is capable of importing and exporting. Any available test data that can be used to demonstrate the various functions of the electronic poll book or verify that the version of the application submitted are identical to the versions that will be certified. Security procedures documentation will contain the recommended security procedures and system hardening setting, and this will ensure the optimum security and functionality of the electronic poll books. And finally, with training manuals, this will be supplied to the customer for use by the individual that will conduct staff and poll worker training. Again, digging a little bit deeper here with functionality and interoperability. So section 1.1 here talks about usability features, and this was originally in our accessibility version 0.9, so we kind of carried them over here. However, sections 1.2 to 1.5 are brand new, and those 19 different requirements we talked about for functionality and interoperability. One of the more popular features that of the baseline functionality that stakeholders really wanted us to see in some of the exit interviews had to do with the 1.2.1, the check-in procedures. And this is where the electronic poll book must enable the users to check in voters that are registered and voters who are not found in the system. At minimum, the voter record must be capable of recording the following information: first, middle, and last name, date of birth, voter registration status, absentee status, the voter's address, and signature. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Election Supporting Technology Evaluation Program Manual, version 1.0. The purpose of the manual is to establish minimum requirements for participation in the ESTEP program. Again, participation is voluntary, but if a manufacturer does decide to participate, they must conform to the manual's procedural requirements. So talking about the certification process with the ESTEP program. The manual currently outlines the possibility of a certification of systems. This process is designed not only for electronic poll books, but for all election supporting technology. This process will be similar to the voting system testing. However, our program will be designed with the agility in mind, since these type of election systems require more frequent updates. So to kind of digging in here and talking about what would be the role in the layout of the testing process, we have pre-testing, and this is where the manufacturer will submit the manufacturer registration form to the ESTEP team. We will review it and either approve it or deny it. From there, an application package gets submitted for testing by the manufacturer to ESTEP. And then the manufacturer will submit the technical documentation to the EAC in the testing lab, the VISTL. And then again, we'll review or approve and deny that. From there, test plans will be submitted to the labs by the manufacturer, and the testing lab will submit the plan to the ESTEP team. We'll review it and again, approve or deny that based upon our manual. Test readiness review. The manufacturer identifies where technical documentation is located for each requirement, and the VISTL will review this and either approve it or deny it. And then there'll be a preliminary kickoff meeting between the ESTEP team, the manufacturer/participant, and the testing lab to be sure we're all on the same page, open communication, and that everybody's prepared for the beginning of testing. So the testing process itself, pre-assessment testing. This is where the testing labs develop vulnerability and threat analysis plans to guide future testing. They will then submit pre-testing assessments to the ESTEP team, who will again review, approve, or deny. Then we'll have penetration testing to use to be able to use to ID flaws in architecture, design, and implementation. Then the VISTLs will submit that documentation to our team, where we will review and either accept or deny. And then finally, the testing to the actual requirements. The VISTLs will verify that the trusted build was created and functions properly. They then will test to the voluntary requirements that we have developed and submit the results to the ESTEP team. Finally, as you can see, the kind of a post-testing overview, kind of have two paths here for ESTEP review and recommendation. If certification is denied, the participant, of course, has the opportunity to cure or request reconsideration if there was an issue they think was should have been denied. And so, if so, we will, of course, review that compliance plan and hear any arguments and then issue a final decision. If a certification is granted, then we will assign a number to the system, and this will be related to the manufacturer's original registration ID at the beginning of the process. We'll certify the system and publish it on our website at eac.gov. And then the certification mark is affixed to the system itself. After certification is granted, participants will be required to adhere to expectations with quality monitoring and can submit requests for interpretation of testing outcomes. So after the last several months of all the work that's went into not only the electronic poll book requirements, but talking with our stakeholders, it has been a very positive experience. And based upon the information presented to you today and on November the 17th, I think the successful completion of the voluntary electronic poll book pilot program, the ESTEP team would strongly recommend that the EAC commissioners approve the election supporting technology evaluation program as a permanent EAC program under the Help America Vote Act authority to produce studies on best practices for testing election supporting technology. This does conclude my presentation today. I would like to thank all the commissioners, Chairman McCormick, for your time and for my staff as well and getting us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. I'd like to open up this to some questions from the EAC commissioners, and I will start. We've talked a lot about the e-poll book pilot today, but I'd like to take a step back and ask a question regarding the recommendation from the end of the presentation. What does the e-poll book pilot and the work of ESTEP so far mean in a larger sense for the agency, as well as the benefits for EAC stakeholders and voters? And what is the potential impact of making ESTEP a permanent part of the EAC?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for this question, Chairwoman McCormick. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation today, there have been a lot of lessons learned from the electronic poll book pilot program that will impact the future, not only for ESTEP, but the methods in which even the testing labs, the manufacturers, the states will engage in testing of this technology. The permanence of ESTEP will allow us to build on the knowledge and expertise for the testing of future election technologies. ESTEP will also, the way it's designed as a response to call for the election community to alleviate the burdens of testing technologies outside the scope of voting systems. I think I speak on behalf of all states when I say it can become challenging to develop a set of technical requirements that place a great deal of emphasis on security for election supporting technologies, especially since these systems can be connected to the internet or hosted in a cloud-based environment. Some of these states don't have the resources to hire specialists in this very specific field or conduct the necessary research to identify all possible vulnerabilities to these systems and to be able to take measures to combat the vulnerability threats through developing security requirements. The necessity to evaluate these systems frequently due to software updates can also become a challenge and a burden for our stakeholders. Additionally, accessibility has become an increasing concern in polling locations across the country. Initiatives to mandate the use of election supporting technology, such as electronic poll books, have brought states, one step closer in achieving this goal with an increase in accessibility in mind. As the elimination as states eliminate the limitations of paper poll book solutions. However, the evaluation of the full accessibility of these technologies has yet to be adequately considered by most states. And so by working together closely with security and accessibility experts, as you mentioned, Chairwoman, with Mandiant and NIST, ESTEP is overcoming these obstacles in an effort to relieve these burdens on our election community stakeholders.
Well, thank you for that. I have a follow-up question. Could you explain the major difference between a pilot program and a certification program?
Absolutely. A pilot program is a small scale or short-term trial program that helps an organization learn how a large-scale project might work in practice. A good pilot program provides a platform to test logistics, address whether there is value in pursuing a formal program. It also reveals deficiencies before spending a significant amount of time and money and energy on a project. A certification program, on the other hand, builds off of lessons learned from the pilot program. A formal certification program results in systems receiving a formal stamp of approval from our agency, for example, that state and local election officials can consider when adopting new equipment in their jurisdictions. It was important for the election supporting technology evaluation program to pilot electronic poll books first to ensure that the EAC, test labs, and voluntary pilot manufacturers fully understood the capabilities of these systems in meeting federal requirements. In piloting these systems, the high-level findings allowed ESTEP to revise draft requirements so that they are testable and agile for implementation in a formal program. It also gave manufacturers a glimpse of the changes they needed to make in order to meet these federal requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Vice Chair Holland, do you have questions for Mr. Phelps?
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Phelps, for the presentation. Thinking back to the e-poll book pilot hearing that we had on November 17th, we heard from a number of stakeholders, of course, from local jurisdictions, manufacturers, the test laboratories, who talked about how they would see the value of a formal certification program. You touched on your own biography. And so thinking about, as someone who has worked at the local level, as someone who has worked at the state level, I was hoping you could talk about, I guess, how that influences your work and how, why you believe the EAC is well suited to carry out the responsibilities of establishing a federal certification program.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your question, Vice Chair Hovland. As we noted on the 17th in our previous hearing, electronic poll books continue to grow in popularity. They're becoming the new standard for checking in voters during federal elections as they assist election workers in securing the voting process. From 2008 to 2023, we have seen a 60% increase in the usage of electronic poll books, which are now used in nearly 2,300 jurisdictions and growing. Currently, 40 states utilize electronic poll books, with 34 of those states having some type of legislation or certification program in place for electronic poll books. With these varied standards on the state level and no prior standards on the federal level, now is the opportune time for the Election Assistance Commission to be the central testing organization for electronic poll books and for our stakeholders across the country. The United States Election Assistance Commission is a fiercely independent and bipartisan agency whose main goal is to assist election officials across the United States while improving administration of elections. In addition, there's also precedent for the EAC to test the test of election technology, as the agency has a history of working with voting system test laboratories to evaluate our nation's voting systems. Since most states reference requirements developed by the EAC in their legislation already, housing the certification program for electronic poll books at the EAC would bring states one step closer to standardizing the testing of all types of election technology and equipment. As Chairwoman McCormick always likes to say, assistance is our middle name. And election, of course, is what we start off with. And for the first time in our agency's history, as you alluded to, Vice Chair, in your opening remarks, the EAC has the staffing and the capacity to thoroughly evaluate the electronic poll books that were developed by commercial manufacturers in state and local jurisdictions in time for 2024. In fact, our stakeholders have asked us for this type of program for quite some time now. And after a successful and positive electronic poll book pilot experience, we strongly believe we're ready to begin testing electronic poll books here at the Election Assistance Commission.
Thank you very much for that. Turn it back to the chair.
Commissioner Palmer, do you have questions for Mr. Phelps?
Yes, thank you. Director Phelps, thank you for all the work you've done on the pilot, and you discussed the revisions to the voluntary electronic poll book requirements, which are to be used in the future formal certification program, with possible revision, of course, from the public that we're now undergoing. Could you pinpoint some of the findings from the pilot itself that prompted those revisions?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for your question, Commissioner Palmer. First and foremost, I think it's important to reiterate that we have not permanently removed any of the requirements from version 0.9 to 1.0. This is because there was not a single requirement in which all piloted system has failed. Since all requirements are capable of being achieved by at least one system, it is our responsibility to ensure the systems are meeting the highest expectations possible for security, accessibility, usability, and now baseline functionality. Taking all this into consideration, our team has analyzed the requirements that receive the lowest scores and determined that some requirements just aren't applicable to all commercial in-house system manufacturers or jurisdictions that they serve at this time. For example, the requirements for multi-factor authentication in audio studies have now become optional to achieve federal certification in version 1.0. Since our main stakeholders are election workers, it was important for ESTEP to consider the impact that security and accessibility had on functionality in a direct sense during an election. These requirements in particular made it difficult to ensure proper functionality of the systems. For some states and local jurisdictions, the manufacturer their own systems, requirements for hosting various languages weren't applicable as well. Considering that some states may mandate certain functionality, security, or accessibility features, these, if applicable, requirements must be evaluated to ensure compliance for marketability. Our highest priority, however, was to analyze the potential challenges for meeting documentation requirements. Through exit interviews with manufacturers and test labs, it was determined that documentation expectations were capable of being achieved if they were communicated properly. The first version of the requirements allowed for interpretation by test labs to determine if documentation was actually necessary to meet the requirement. Through our analysis, we found that there were over 20 requirements where participants didn't achieve a passing score because documentation expectations weren't clearly communicated in the requirement. As a result of this, we have revised our requirements to include documentation tags for easy identification, and we will also be developing test readiness review checklists for manufacturers and participants to use in preparation for certification testing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hicks, do you have a question for Director Phelps?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Mr. Phelps, as we know, based on the findings of the pilot and from our panelists on the November 17th hearing and from public comments, there's a need for electronic poll book certification program to be effective and agile. How will this program's voluntary requirements and manual address this need?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your question, Commissioner Hicks. The ESTEP recognizes this need early in the development process of both the voluntary electronic poll book requirements and our program manual. As a result of conversations both internally and with our stakeholders at the conclusion of the pilot, we certainly understand that there's a delicate balance between being agile with our program while simultaneously offering industry standards for electronic poll book cybersecurity requirements. Since electronic poll books are connected to the internet in some jurisdictions across the country, we do not want to reduce our requirements or compromise the security of EPBs in any way. Having said that, in Chapter 7 of the ESTEP manual, we do allow for the manufacturer to make emergency changes to their electronic poll book if they need to make the changes within a pre-election timeline. We understand that minor changes must be made with these technologies outside of the election timeframe, and we will work closely with the manufacturer, the in-house states, and the labs to be sure there is a quick turnaround and everything is thoroughly reviewed in a short amount of time. As we mentioned earlier, the requirements have been revised so that they are more clear and comprehensible to both the manufacturer and test labs. Some requirements are also optional to achieve certification, as they may not be applicable to all systems. Thank you.
A follow-up question to that, because we've received various questions from the election community about how ESTEP will relate to or collaborate with other programs at the EAC, like the testing and certification program. Can you explain how you foresee ESTEP interacting with these other programs?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great follow-up question, Commissioner. Even though ESTEP is its own division within our agency, it would be similar to the EAC's voting system testing and certification program. We would focus on adopting only best practices for developing test requirements, matrices, and program guidelines. As a matter of fact, we've already developed our voluntary electronic poll book requirements with the guidance and help of testing and certifications, voluntary voting system guidelines. And I also want to just give a shout out to the testing and certification staff for being so incredibly helpful during this process. We do anticipate that we will begin, lay groundwork for advancement within the agency, allowing others to adopt best practices that we will continue to develop in the future. We foresee ESTEP collaborating with the divisions such as Clearinghouse to produce and release best practices for election supporting technologies that may not be testable under a full certification program. And we also understand that, ESTEP, we need to work closely with the EAC's new field services program and Dan Cox and his team, because, the quality monitoring program is going to be crucial and just invaluable to ensuring that these technologies are being well maintained in the field. And they will also, field services can also investigate any anomalies that will require additional review. So that is going to be extremely helpful to the ESTEP team and to the agency as a whole.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks, and thank you, Director Phelps, for answering our questions. I'll now take a motion to adopt the election supporting technology evaluation program as a permanent EAC program as presented by EA staff and reviewed by the commissioners.
I move to adopt the election supporting technology evaluation program.
I would second that.
We have a motion before us to adopt the election supporting technology evaluation program. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. The ayes have it, and the motion to adopt the election supporting technology evaluation program as a permanent EAC program is approved. The commissioners will next review the voluntary electronic poll work requirements version 1.0 and the election supporting technology evaluation program manual once the public comment for both closes on December 14th, 2023. Information on how to submit comments is available on the Federal Register. So thank you to Jay for participating in today's virtual event. Thank you, commissioners. More than 20 years ago, HAVA charged the EAC with providing comprehensive assistance to election administrators across the U.S. Since that time, the agency has worked closely to support our nation's elections. The promise of HAVA calls on the EAC to improve federal elections and to assist election officials and voters. And we embrace this mission wholeheartedly. There is still work to be done, but the establishment of the ESTEP program will help the EAC continue efforts to be a leading voice for confidence in election officials, the election process, and the security of our election equipment. So unless there's further business, this concludes today's virtual event, and I will now take a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
I move we adjourn.
I second it.
Been properly moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is concluded. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know.